Wealthy CEO married a black janitor's daughter to escape a loveless deal, but what she did next shocked him. For 25 years, Blake Turner had everything money could buy, until the day he traded a billion-dollar merger for a midnight wedding with a janitor's daughter. The Turner Technologies boardroom gleamed with polished mahogany, and Blake's father, William Turner, stood at the head of the table, laser pointers circling figures that represented the future of their tech empire. The Chen merger secures our position in the Asian market for the next decade, Williams said, his voice carrying the weight of 3 generations of business success. And Jennifer Chen is exactly the kind of partner this family needs. Harvard Business School, connections throughout Beijing's tech corridor, and most important, her father's blessing. Blake nodded mechanically, his attention drifting to the clock. It was nearly midnight. She would be here soon. Would you marry someone you barely knew to escape a fate you couldn't accept? How far would you go to rewrite your future? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Are you even listening? William demanded, shutting off the projection. I heard you, Blake replied. Marriage as a business transaction. Very 21st century of us. The silence that followed felt heavy with expectation. Blake had been disappointing his father since the day he chose computer engineering over finance. Now, at 25, he was expected to sacrifice his personal life to expand the Turner Tech kingdom. This isn't about romance, son. It's about legacy. Maybe I want to build my own legacy, Blake said, rising from his chair. The cleaning cart's squeaky wheel announced her arrival before she appeared in the doorway. Zora Johnson paused when she saw them, her dark eyes taking in the tension. Sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice soft but confident. I can come back. No need, Blake said quickly. We're finished here. William gathered his presentation materials with a sigh of frustration. We'll continue this discussion tomorrow. The Chens expect an answer by the end of the week. After his father left, Blake remained, watching as Zora emptied trash bins with practiced efficiency. Her movements were precise, economical, nothing like the hesitant mannerisms of the corporate daughters he'd been introduced to at networking events. Your father seems upset, she observed, not looking up from her work. He wants me to marry a woman I've met twice, to secure a business deal. Zora paused, meeting his eyes for the first time that night. And you don't want to? Would you marry a stranger because your family told you to? Her laugh was unexpected, rich and genuine. My father would never ask that of me. He'd say no amount of money is worth selling your right to choose. Blake watched her pull a thick law textbook from beneath her cleaning cart, checking the time before setting it on the edge of a desk. Pre-law at Boston University, she explained, catching his curious glance. I clean offices to pay tuition. You work here every night, just weeknights. I have classes during the day. Blake had noticed her weeks ago, reading between floors, her focus intense even after hours of physical labor. Something about her determination had drawn him to start working late, their midnight conversations becoming the highlight of his increasingly suffocating life. If you could do anything, completely free choice, what would it be, he asked suddenly. She considered him carefully before answering. I'd change how the legal system works for people like my father. Brilliant minds shut out because they don't have the right connections or look the right way. Is that why you're studying law? That's part of it. Her eyes held something he couldn't quite read. What about you? If you weren't being forced into corporate marriage, what would you choose? I'd rebuild Turner Tech from the ground up. Ethical innovation instead of market domination. The words surprised him with their truth. Their conversation stretched past midnight, her cleaning forgotten, his family obligations temporarily suspended in the bubble they created together. When the security guard's footsteps approached for the midnight round, Blake made a decision that would change everything. Marry me instead. Zora's textbook slipped from her hands. What? I'm serious. Marry me tonight. I need out of this arrangement. And you? Need what? A rich white savior. Her eyes narrowed. No, a partnership. Freedom to finish your degree without working yourself to exhaustion. And I need someone my family hasn't selected to control my future. You're asking me to marry you, A man I barely know? Because you're having a tantrum about your privilege problems? I'm asking because in the past month, you're the only person who's talked to me like I'm more than a Turner asset. And yes, it solves my immediate problem, but it could help us both. She studied him with an intensity that made him wonder if she could see right through him. Your family would disown you for marrying someone like me. Someone brilliant, hardworking, or do you mean someone black? All of the above. Boston's old money isn't known for its progressive views. Then they'll have to evolve, or I'll build something better without them. The audacity of his proposal hung between them, neither moving until the security guard's flashlight beam swept across the doorway. There's a courthouse that handles late filings until 2 a.m., Blake said quietly. We could be there in 20 minutes. This is insane, she whispered, but he noticed she was gathering her things. Probably, but it's a choice. Our choice, not theirs. The taxi ride downtown passed in electric silence. Blake kept waiting for reality to hit, for the absurdity of marrying his father's janitor's daughter to sink in. But all he felt was a strange sense of rightness, of finally taking control. What neither spoke aloud were their true motives. He seeking escape, she executing something that looked suspiciously like justice. But what began as mutual deception was about to become something far more dangerous, an inconvenient truth. Would you marry someone you barely knew to escape a fate you couldn't accept? How far would you go to rewrite your future? Tell me in the comments below. The elite of Boston called it a scandal. His family called it betrayal. Blake called it freedom. None of them, knowing the woman he married, had spent years planning his family's downfall. The morning after their courthouse wedding, Blake's phone vibrated nonstop. His mother's tearful voicemails gave way to his father's cold fury, culminating in a text message that changed everything. Access denied. Security has been instructed to escort you from the premises if you attempt to enter any Turner property. Your accounts will be frozen by noon. They're cutting me off, Blake told Zora, who was making coffee in his luxury apartment kitchen. He looked up from his phone, expecting shock, but found only calm acceptance. You expected that, didn't you? She asked, sliding a mug toward him. Eventually, not within 12 hours. He attempted to order breakfast delivery, only to have his credit card declined. That was fast. Zora pulled cash from her wallet. Welcome to How the Other Half Lives. First lesson, always keep emergency cash. By sunset, building security had delivered boxes containing his personal belongings from his office. By the following morning, his key card no longer opened the garage to his luxury building. Within 48 hours, Blake Turner, tech prodigy and heir to billions, was effectively erased. We need to find a place, he said, scrolling through apartment listings on Zora's laptop. Something I can afford on savings until I figure out next steps. I have a place, she replied carefully. It's nothing like this, but the rent is paid through the semester. Her apartment occupied the third floor of a converted brownstone in Roxbury. The living room doubled as a dining room, with a kitchen barely big enough for one person to navigate. Books lined every available surface: constitutional law, civil rights history, technical manuals on encryption. It's small but functional, she said, watching his reaction closely. Blake set down his single suitcase. It's honest. Nothing in my life has felt honest in a long time. That night, lying beside his new wife on a bed built for one, Blake faced the reality of his choices. His phone had been remotely wiped by corporate IT. His email access terminated. His existence as Blake Turner, tech heir, had been efficiently erased. You're handling this better than I expected, Zora murmured in the darkness. Is that disappointment I hear? Curiosity. Most people born into your world don't adapt well to losing it. Maybe I never really fit into that world. He turned to face her, their noses inches apart. What about you? Having regrets about marrying a man with no money, no job, and an angry family? She was quiet for so long he thought she might have fallen asleep. I didn't marry you for your money, she finally whispered. And somehow Blake knew these were the only honest words either of them had spoken since meeting. The next weeks passed in a blur of adjustment. Blake's private bank accounts contained enough to sustain them while he networked with former colleagues who hadn't been scared off by his family's influence. Zora continued her classes and cleaning shifts, though Blake noticed she often disappeared for hours without explanation. Study group, she'd say when he asked, or library research. He didn't push, grateful for the space to rebuild his identity separate from the Turner name. For the first time, he was forced to consider his value beyond inheritance. The first sign something wasn't right came when Blake overheard Zora on the phone while she thought he was showering. "The files arrived," she said in a hushed voice. "Everything we need for the next phase." Yes, he's completely cut off from them now. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Blake stepped back from the bathroom door, water still running. A cold feeling settled in his stomach. The conversation could have been about anything, a surprise, a school project. But something in her tone triggered an alarm. That night, he pretended to sleep while Zora worked on her laptop. Through barely open eyes, he watched her type rapidly, her face illuminated by the screen. She wasn't working on class assignments. The documents displayed column after column of Turner Tech employee data, salary information, and internal communications. The following morning, Blake checked news about Turner Technologies while Zora was in class. The headline made his coffee mug slip from his fingers. Turner Tech stock falls amid discrimination lawsuit filing. With shaking hands, he clicked the article. A class action lawsuit had been filed alleging systematic racial discrimination in hiring, promotion, and compensation at Turner Technologies over a 20-year period. The lead attorney quoted in the article was Aaron Cohen, a prominent civil rights lawyer known for taking down corporate giants. Blake scrolled through the complaint, recognizing internal data that only someone with executive access should have been able to obtain. Access like he'd had before being cut off. Access that might have been available to someone close to him. When the notification appeared on her phone, Turner Tech stock falls amid discrimination lawsuit filing. Zora slipped away to the bathroom, heart pounding. 3 years of work was finally bearing fruit, and her new husband had no idea she planted the seeds. Have you ever taken a stand that cost you everything you thought you valued? Share your story of choosing your own path below. She married him to destroy his family legacy. But waking up beside him each morning was turning the perfect revenge into the perfect complication. Zora never expected to enjoy Blake's company. In the meticulous plan she'd crafted with her father and their attorneys, Blake Turner was simply a means to an end. Access to evidence that would prove decades of discrimination at Turner Technologies. His sudden marriage proposal had accelerated their timeline, but not changed the objective. What wasn't in the plan? Blake's genuine attempt to learn to cook. "I think I've discovered why my family employs personal chefs," he announced, staring at the blackened remains of what was supposed to be breakfast. Smoke hung in the small kitchen while the alarm beeped overhead. Zora stood on a chair, waving a dish towel at the detector. "You turned the burner to high and then answered emails for 10 minutes. What did you expect?" In my defense, I've never actually made toast that didn't pop up automatically. She shouldn't have found it endearing. This privileged man-child learning basic survival skills at 24. It directly contradicted the enemy image she'd constructed over years of watching her father clean up after entitled executives. Yet somehow, Blake's willingness to fail repeatedly without complaint was charming. "Here," she said, handing him another piece of bread. "Watch it the entire time. Don't look away, not even for a second." He focused on the bread with the same intensity she'd seen him apply to coding problems. And when he produced a perfectly golden piece of toast, his triumphant grin was almost boyish. "Not bad for the disinherited son of a tech tyrant," she said, accepting half the toast. "First toast, then the world," he replied, and they both laughed. These moments of connection complicated everything. Each morning, Zora woke with a growing weight of guilt as she transferred information from Blake's old files to the legal team. Each evening, their conversations made maintaining emotional distance increasingly difficult. "Why law?" Blake asked one night as they shared takeout on the floor, case files carefully hidden in her backpack. "You clearly have the technical skills for programming." "My father wanted to be a programmer," she answered carefully. "He never got the chance. Because of opportunities or Because people like your father made sure doors stayed closed for people like mine. Blake set down his container. I'm not my father. Aren't you? You benefited from his system your entire life. Until I chose not to. Until I walked away. You walked away over an arranged marriage, not moral principles. His eyes held hers steadily. Maybe it started that way, but I'm seeing things differently now. Those moments of honest confrontation were dangerous, blurring the lines between her mission and her growing feelings. The law books she hid whenever he entered the room weighed heavier each day, not from their content, but from what they represented. The choice between justice and the heart. Blake found independent consulting work with startups willing to hire him despite his family's influence. Zora noticed he specifically sought out minority-owned businesses, though she never commented on the change. At night, they fell into a routine that felt disturbingly domestic. Sharing space, discussing ideas, occasionally brushing against each other in ways that left her skin tingling. You could have any apartment in Boston now, she pointed out after his first consulting check arrived. Why are you still here? He looked around the small space they'd been sharing for nearly 2 months. Do you want me to leave? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to voice. No, she admitted finally, but I don't understand why you'd choose to stay. Maybe I like the company. Their first kiss happened naturally, without calculation. Zora reaching past him for a book, Blake turning at the same moment, their lips meeting in a startled collision that quickly softened into something intentional. She told herself it was part of maintaining cover. He believed it was the beginning of something real. Both might have been wrong. The email arrived without warning as Zora was preparing for finals. Anonymous source provides critical evidence in Turner tech discrimination case. As Blake read the headline on his phone, Zora watched his face change, knowing the evidence mentioned had been extracted from conversations they'd had last week, words she'd carefully elicited and documented while lying in his arms. His eyes met hers across the room, a question forming that she wasn't prepared to answer. Did you see this? He asked, holding up his phone. Just now, she lied, her heart pounding. Looks like someone inside the company is talking. The data they're citing, it's from projects I worked on personally. She forced her expression to remain neutral. Maybe someone on your old team? Maybe. His gaze lingered a moment too long. It's strange timing. That night, for the first time since their wedding, Blake slept on the couch, claiming a headache. Zora lay awake, staring at the ceiling, caught between two impossibilities. Betraying the justice mission she'd committed her life to, or betraying the man who was becoming impossibly important to her. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. Next phase proceeding as planned. Cohen needs the executive compensation files tomorrow. The files in question sat in an encrypted folder on her laptop, extracted from Blake's archived emails during their 3rd week of marriage. Sending them would push the case forward significantly. It would also definitively prove Turner Technologies had systematically underpaid employees of color for identical roles. When does a lie of omission become a betrayal? She whispered to the darkness. At what point does seeking justice become personal revenge? The line between right and wrong had never seemed so blurry. When does a lie of omission become a betrayal? At what point does seeking justice become personal revenge? Your thoughts? He built technological empires from code and algorithms, yet couldn't see the pattern forming in his own home. Every conversation cataloged, every corporate secret documented by the woman who kissed him goodnight. Blake couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The lawsuit against Turner Technologies continued gaining momentum, each new filing containing information that felt eerily familiar, data he'd discussed with Zora during late-night conversations. Details only someone with intimate knowledge of internal operations would know. Coincidence, he told himself, watching her prepare for class one morning. Or corporate leaks. It happens all the time. But doubt had taken root, flowering into questions he wasn't ready to ask. 3 months into their impromptu marriage, Blake landed a consulting contract that would stabilize their finances. The client, a Black-owned fintech startup facing patent challenges from larger competitors, specifically sought him out. "We need someone who understands how the big firms operate," the founder explained. "Someone willing to work outside traditional systems." The irony wasn't lost on Blake. His family name, once his greatest asset, now toxic in corporate circles, had become valuable in unexpected ways. He was building a reputation as the insider gone rogue, the heir who rejected the kingdom. "I'm going to need my old research files," he told Zora over dinner. "There's a storage unit in Cambridge where I kept backups before everything." She set down her fork carefully. "Your family doesn't have access? They don't know it exists. I've always kept personal backups offline. Corporate paranoia, I learned from my father, ironically." The next day, they drove to a climate control. Hours passed as they sorted through documentation. Blake focused on patent applications while Zora examined early Turner Tech organizational charts, her eyes lingering on employment records. "Your company had very few black employees in technical roles," she noted, scanning a department roster from 2005. "Not my company anymore," Blake reminded her. "But yes, tech has a diversity problem. This goes beyond industry standards. These numbers show active exclusion." Blake glanced at her, struck by the personal edge in her voice. "The lawsuit might actually do some good then. If they can prove intent," she said, photographing a page with her phone. When she noticed him watching, she added, "For my corporate law paper. It's a perfect case study." He nodded, turning back to his files, but the moment lodged in his mind alongside other small inconsistencies he'd been noticing. That evening, as Blake reviewed early Turner encryption projects, Zora's phone rang. She stepped onto the apartment's small balcony to answer, her voice too low to overhear. When she returned, her expression was carefully neutral. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just school stress. Finals coming up." The lie hung between them, small but significant. Later that night, Blake woke to find Zora's side of the bed empty. The bathroom light was off, but a faint glow came from the living room. Moving silently, he peered around the corner to see her hunched over her laptop, scanning documents he recognized from their storage unit visit. His first instinct was confrontation, but something held him back. Instead, he returned to bed, mind racing with possibilities, none of them comfortable. The next morning, Blake called a former colleague who'd remained friendly despite the Turner family directive to blacklist him. "I need information on a discrimination lawsuit," he said once pleasantries were exchanged. "Your family's mess? It's getting ugly, man." The plaintiffs have internal communication records going back 15 years. Someone high up has been feeding them evidence. "Any leads on who?" "Word is it's someone with executive access who left recently. Most fingers point to you, honestly." Blake's grip tightened on his phone. "It's not me. Never said it was. But whoever it is knows exactly where the bodies are buried." After the call, Blake returned to the storage unit alone, this time looking not for patent information, but for anything that might explain Zora's interest in Turner Tech's employment history. Near the bottom of a box labeled MIT Recruitment, he found a folder of candidate evaluations from his father's early days building the company. The photograph slipped from between archived contracts. Two young men at MIT, arms around each other's shoulders, names scrawled on the back. William Turner and Marcus Johnson. Encryption Project, 2002. Blake froze, recognizing his father instantly. The second name appeared nowhere in company records, but he'd heard it every day for months now, from his wife's lips when she spoke of her father. His hands shaking, Blake dug deeper into the file, finding project documentation listing both men as co-developers of an encryption algorithm that later became Turner Technologies' cornerstone product. Yet the patent application included only his father's name. The drive home passed in a blur, his mind recalibrating everything he thought he knew. Marcus Johnson, Zora's father, had been his father's research partner. Now Marcus cleaned the offices of the company built on their joint work, while his daughter. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Their marriage, her convenient appearance in his life, the lawsuit's insider information. Blake parked outside their apartment building, unable to move from the driver's seat. His phone rang, his father's private number, which hadn't contacted him since the disownment. "Blake, William Turner's voice was tense. "Stop digging into old projects. Some doors should remain closed." "How did you know I was?" "I know everything that happens in my company, even in storage units I'm not supposed to know about." Blake's free hand clenched into a fist. "Did you steal Marcus Johnson's work?" The silence confirmed what the document suggested. "Before you continue whatever misguided investigation you've launched," his father said finally, "you might want to ask your wife why she's meeting with Aaron Cohen, the attorney leading the discrimination suit against us." The call ended, leaving Blake staring at his darkened phone screen, reflection fractured like the truth he'd been living with. Have you ever discovered something about your family that changed how you saw your entire life? How did you handle that revelation? Share below. While cleaning his family's corporate offices each night, Marcus Johnson taught his daughter two things: how to code unbreakable algorithms and how to dismantle the empire built on stealing them. The Detroit Public Library became Zora's second home after school. While other 12-year-olds played video games or watched TV, she sat beside her father at the public computers, learning C++ and Java from outdated textbooks. "Why do I need to know this?" she'd asked once, frustrated by a particularly difficult coding problem. "Because knowledge is the one thing they can't take from you," Marcus had answered, his janitorial uniform still on after his day's shift. "And because someday you'll use these skills to take back what's ours." Marcus Johnson hadn't always pushed mops through corporate hallways. Zora grew up hearing bedtime stories about MIT, about revolutionary encryption methods, about a partnership with a brilliant white classmate named William Turner. Her father spoke of those days not with bitterness, but with purpose, documenting every detail of how innovation became theft, how partnership became exploitation. The plan formed gradually over years. Marcus collecting evidence while cleaning executive offices, Zora developing the legal expertise to use it. Operation Reclamation, they called it privately. A mission to restore not just financial compensation, but historical truth. Blake's unexpected marriage proposal hadn't been part of the plan, but it accelerated their timeline in ways they couldn't have orchestrated. Now, as Blake dove deeper into his family's archives, Zora found herself caught between loyalty to her father's 20-year mission and unexpected feelings for the son of their enemy. The university archives held fragments of innovation history, coding competition trophies bearing two names, academic journals publishing revolutionary encryption theories co-authored by students who would take vastly different paths after graduation. Blake had been researching independently for days, growing more distant with each discovery. Zora knew it was only a matter of time before he connected all the dots. "He's asking about the encryption patents," she told her father during their weekly coffee meeting. "Specifically, your contributions." Marcus looked older than his 50 years, decades of night shifts and injustice etched into his face. "And what have you told him?" "Nothing yet. The lawsuit is progressing without needing his direct involvement." "That wasn't my question, Zora." His eyes, so like her own, studied her carefully. "Have your feelings for him complicated things?" She stared into her coffee, unable to meet his gaze. "He's nothing like his father. He benefits from his father's crimes. He walked away from that, chose his own path. After you strategically appeared in his life," Marcus reminded her gently. "Don't confuse the mission with emotion." But separation had become increasingly difficult. Each night, lying beside Blake, each morning waking to his sleepy smile, each discovered piece of their complex puzzle brought her closer to an impossible choice. The previous evening, Blake had returned from another research trip withdrawn and thoughtful. Instead of sharing his findings as he usually did, he'd simply watched her, as though seeing her for the first time. "What?" she'd asked, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. "Do you ever think about how we met?" He'd responded. "The odds of it, me working late exactly when you were cleaning? The timing of everything." The question had sent ice through her veins. "What are you asking, Blake?" "Nothing," he'd said after a long pause. "Just thinking about chance and choice." Now, sitting across from her father, Zora faced the reckoning she'd been avoiding. "What happens when Blake discovers everything?" she asked quietly. "That depends on who he truly is," Marcus replied. "His father's son or his own man." The phone call came at midnight. Blake's father, voice tight with controlled rage, stop digging into old projects. Some doors should remain closed. Before Blake could respond, his father added, "And you might want to ask your wife why she's meeting with Aaron Cohen, the attorney leading the discrimination suit against us." Zora had been pretending to sleep when he took the call, but she felt the change in his breathing, the sudden tension in his body as he sat up in bed. "How long?" he asked into the darkness, not turning to look at her. She didn't pretend not to understand. "Since before we met." Was any of it real? Us? This? His voice remained unervingly calm. Zora sat up, switching on the lamp. Blake's expression was carefully blank. The face of a man who'd grown up in boardrooms, learning to hide emotion behind calculation. "The plan was real," she began. "Everything I've told you about my father is true. He worked with yours at MIT. They developed the core encryption technology together. Your father stole it, patented it solely in his name, and built an empire while my father was blacklisted throughout the industry. So I was what, collateral damage? A convenient access point. Initially, yes. The truth hurt to speak aloud. You were the quickest path to evidence we needed. And now," his eyes finally met hers, wounded but searching. "Now, I don't know where the mission ends and my feelings begin." Her voice broke on the admission. "I didn't plan to care about you." Blake stood, pacing the small bedroom. "All those nights, I talked about work, about projects, about internal structures. You were gathering evidence." "Yes. The lawsuit, you're part of it. My father and I have been building the case for years. Your marriage proposal just accelerated things." He stopped moving, staring at her with dawning comprehension. "You never needed me to fall in love with you. You just needed my access, my trust." "Blake, did you laugh about it with your father?" The idiot turned her air, so desperate to rebel against his family that he married the first woman who saw him as more than a bank account. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Zora? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, our entire relationship was built on a lie." "When was the moment you realized your parents were complex humans with their own stories, not just the roles they played in your life?" Comment your experience below. Their first real fight exploded not from the secrets they kept, but from the truths they accidentally uncovered about each other. Rain lashed against their apartment windows, the storm outside matching the chaos within as accusations flew between them. Papers scattered across floors, and years of hidden motives threatened to destroy what neither had expected to find: real connection. "So everything, from the moment we met, was calculated?" Blake demanded, his voice hoarse after hours of confrontation. Zora stood her ground, arms crossed protectively. "Not everything. Not this." She gestured between them. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? Our entire relationship is built on a lie, and your family built an empire on stolen ideas. My father mopped floors for 20 years while watching William Turner become a billionaire from his work." Blake ran his hands through his hair, pacing the small living room. "I'm not defending what my father did, but you used me to access evidence of corporate theft and discrimination." "Yes." Her voice softened. "But something changed, Blake. I changed. When exactly did your mission of revenge transform into genuine feeling? After we slept together? After I fell in love with you? After you extracted enough evidence to destroy my family name?" The word love hung between them, never before spoken aloud. "I don't know," she admitted, her composure finally cracking. "That's what scares me. I don't know where the mission ends and my heart begins anymore." Lightning illuminated the room, thunder following immediately, the storm directly overhead. The power flickered once, twice, then plunged the apartment into darkness. In the sudden quiet, their ragged breathing seemed amplified. A phone screen lit up, Blake's, casting harsh blue light across his features. "I need to understand," he said finally. "All of it, from the beginning." Zora found candles in a kitchen drawer, her hands shaking as she lit them. The warm glow softened the tension but couldn't erase it. "My father was brilliant," she began, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "MIT scholarship, top of his class. Your father was his roommate, then research partner." Blake sat opposite her, close enough to touch, but separated by an invisible wall of betrayal. They developed the encryption algorithm together. Equal work, equal brilliance. When Silicon Valley investors showed interest, your father arranged the meetings. My father was excluded from key negotiations because the venture capitalists felt more comfortable dealing with William alone. And my father cut him out completely. Blake finished. Used family connections to patent their joint work. When my father confronted him with proof of co-development, your family blacklisted him throughout the industry. Computer science jobs disappeared. References vanished. Eventually, the only work he could find was janitorial. Ironically, the company built on his ideas. Blake's face tightened with shame. So you planned justice, not revenge. Her eyes glistened in the candlelight. 20 years of systematic discrimination against black employees. 20 years of stolen innovation. We were building a case, gathering evidence, until I proposed and fast-tracked her access. She nodded. It seemed like fate. Too perfect to pass up. Did you ever plan to tell me? I don't know, she admitted. As the case progressed, the evidence mounted without needing your direct involvement. And then I started caring about you, really caring, and everything got complicated. Blake stared at the shadows dancing on the wall. I've spent months rebuilding my identity apart from my family legacy, finding my own path. And now I discover that path was engineered by you. Not all of it. You chose to leave Turner Tech over ethical concerns before we even met. Did I? Or was that manipulation too? Her phone buzzed with a text. Blake's eyes narrowed. Let me guess, your father or the legal team? Zora checked the screen, then set the phone face down. We don't have to address this tonight. Oh, but we do. He moved closer, the anger in his eyes giving way to something more complex. Because despite everything, despite the lies and manipulation, I still want you. And that's the most twisted part of all. She reached for him instinctively, her fingers digging into his shoulders. Anger and desire fused into something primal that transcended their deceptions. Tell me one true thing, he demanded against her throat. I never planned to feel this way about you, she confessed, words more naked than her body. Their coming together was nothing like previous encounters. No gentleness, no careful exploration, just raw emotion translated into physical need. Clothes torn aside, bodies colliding with the force of their conflict. Each touch an accusation, each kiss a plea for understanding. Afterward, breathing hard, tangled in sheets damp with reconciliation, she made a decision that would change everything. There's something I need to show you. Reaching for a laptop, she entered a password and opened a folder labeled Turner vs. Johnson, the original betrayal. Everything we've gathered, she explained, turning the screen toward him. The complete case. If you're going to hate me, at least know exactly why I did what I did. Blake stared at the screen, then at her face illuminated by its glow. I don't hate you. That's the problem. Have you ever had a fight that changed everything? Where truth finally broke through defenses? What happened afterward? Share your experience. The evidence had been hiding in plain sight for 20 years. Dormant code within Turner Tech's most valuable products, secretly signed by the man who mopped its floors each night. Lines of original code projected onto their living room wall. Marcus Johnson's digital signature embedded within algorithms that had generated billions. Innovative pathways marked with mathematical poetry only its true creator could have written. He encoded his name into the foundation of every major Turner product, Zora explained, pointing to patterns Blake had seen his entire career without recognizing. Not just his name, dates, references to his hometown, even my birth date. All hidden in the architecture your family claimed was solely their creation. Blake stared at the projection, professional admiration warring with personal betrayal. It's brilliant. The markers are subtle enough to avoid detection during normal operations, but unmistakable once you know what to look for. My father taught me to find them when I was 14. It became a game, spotting his digital fingerprints in software that made your family billions while we lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Detroit. The night stretched into morning as Blake absorbed the full scope of Zora's evidence. Employment records showing qualified black candidates systematically rejected. Salary data revealing consistent underpayment along racial lines. Internal communications discussing cultural fit as code for discrimination. And at the core, the original MIT research clearly. "I never planned to feel this way about you," she confessed, words more naked than her body. Their coming together was nothing like previous encounters. No gentleness, no careful exploration, just raw emotion translated into physical need. Clothes torn aside, bodies colliding with the force of their conflict. Each touch an accusation, each kiss a plea for understanding. Afterward, breathing hard, tangled in sheets damp with reconciliation, she made a decision that would change everything. "There's something I need to show you." Reaching for a laptop, she entered a password and opened a folder labeled Turner versus Johnson, the original betrayal. "Everything we've gathered," she explained, turning the screen toward him. "The complete case. If you're going to hate me, at least know exactly why I did what I did." Blake stared at the screen, then at her face illuminated by its glow. "I don't hate you. That's the problem. Have you ever had a fight that changed everything? Where truth finally broke through defenses? What happened afterward? Share your experience." The evidence had been hiding in plain sight for 20 years. Dormant code within Turner Tech's most valuable products, secretly signed by the man who mopped its floors each night. Lines of original code projected onto their living room wall. Marcus Johnson's digital signature embedded within algorithms that had generated billions. Innovative pathways marked with mathematical poetry only its true creator could have written. He encoded his name into the foundation of every major Turner product, Zora explained, pointing to patterns Blake had seen his entire career without recognizing. Not just his name, dates, references to his hometown, even my birth date. All hidden in the architecture your family claimed was solely their creation. Blake stared at the projection, professional admiration warring with personal betrayal. "It's brilliant. The markers are subtle enough to avoid detection during normal operations, but unmistakable once you know what to look for. My father taught me to find them when I was 14. It became a game, spotting his digital fingerprints in software that made your family billions while we lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Detroit." The night stretched into morning as Blake absorbed the full scope of Zora's evidence. Employment records showing qualified black candidates systematically rejected. Salary data revealing consistent underpayment along racial lines. Internal communications discussing cultural fit as code for discrimination. And at the core, the original MIT research clearly showing Marcus Johnson's co-development of the encryption algorithm that launched Turner Technologies. "I knew my father was ruthless in business," Blake said as dawn broke. "But this goes beyond competitive tactics. This is why I'm studying law," Zora replied quietly. "Technical genius couldn't protect my father. Money couldn't help him. Only legal accountability might finally bring justice." Blake rubbed his eyes, exhausted from the emotional and intellectual marathon. "What do you want from me now?" "My blessing to destroy what's left of my family name. I want you to see the complete picture before you decide who you are in this story." He turned to her, really looking at the woman he'd impulsively married. Behind the deception was something he recognized, the same drive for integrity that had pushed him away from his family's influence. "My father always told me our success came from innovation and strategic vision," Blake said. "My entire identity was built around continuing that legacy of excellence. Now I discover we're thieves who built wealth by stealing black innovation and systematically excluding black talent. Not we, your father. You didn't know. Ignorance isn't innocence when you benefit from the crime." He closed the laptop, decision forming. "I want to meet him." "Who?" "Your father, Marcus Johnson, the man who should have been my father's partner instead of his janitor." The meeting was arranged for the following evening at a small coffee shop midway between Boston and the suburb where Marcus lived. Blake arrived early, anxiety churning as he considered what to say to the man whose life had been derailed by his family. Marcus Johnson entered precisely at 7. Tall, distinguished despite his 60 years, with Zora's intelligent eyes and watchful demeanor. Blake stood, hand extended awkwardly. "Mr. Johnson." Marcus studied him before accepting the handshake. "Blake Turner, you look like your father did at MIT. I'm hoping the resemblance ends there," Blake replied, the tension broken by Marcus's unexpected chuckle. "Zora said you had spine. Sit down, son. We have much to discuss." For 2 hours, Marcus filled gaps in the story. The early brilliance of the Turner-Johnson partnership, the subtle ways racism had infected their trajectory, the moment he realized his contribution had been erased. "Why janitorial work?" Blake asked. "At Turner Tech specifically, strategic positioning." Marcus answered without hesitation. "They thought I was broken, just another black man accepting his place. In reality, I was gathering evidence every night, documenting patterns across departments, securing my digital signature in products they claimed were theirs alone. A 20-year undercover operation. A 20-year lesson for my daughter about patience, purpose, and principle." Blake glanced at Zora, seeing her father's determination reflected in her expression. "And I became part of that lesson." "You became an unexpected variable," Marcus corrected. "The plan never included genuine feeling." The notification appeared on both their phones simultaneously. Breaking news. Turner Technologies faces class action lawsuit alleging decades of racial discrimination and intellectual property theft. The lead plaintiff named in the suit, Marcus Johnson. The primary evidence, documents Blake had accessed from company archives days earlier. "It started," Zora whispered, scanning the article. Blake read the details with strange detachment, feeling simultaneously connected to and separate from the Turner name being dragged through public scrutiny. "Your father will respond with everything he has," Marcus warned. "Money, influence, character assassination. He won't go down quietly." "Neither will we," Blake replied, surprising himself with the pronoun choice. Later that night, as Blake and Zora walked back to their apartment, he asked the question that had been haunting him. "If I hadn't proposed that night, if we hadn't married, how would you have accessed the evidence you needed?" "Longer timeline, more risk, less comprehensive data." She hesitated before adding, "I never expected you to stand with us against your own family. Maybe I'm standing with my family, the one I chose rather than the one I was born into." She stopped walking, searching his face in the streetlight. "Does that mean?" "It means I'm still processing everything. It means I'm angry about being manipulated, but also about what my father did. It means..." He took her hand, their first physical contact since the fight. "It means I need to figure out who Blake Turner is when everything I thought I knew about my family is a lie. And us. That might be the only real thing in this whole mess." What would you do if you discovered your family's wealth came from stealing someone else's genius? Would you walk away or try to make it right? Tell me your thoughts. The private investigators followed her for weeks, capturing photographs of legal meetings and family visits. Unaware they were documenting the very discrimination the lawsuit alleged. "Don't look now, but we've got company again," Blake murmured as they exited the courthouse after a preliminary hearing. "Black sedan, 2 men, same ones from yesterday." Zora nodded slightly, maintaining her composed expression for the cluster of reporters gathered on the steps. "Your father's getting desperate. My father's getting thorough," Blake corrected. He built his empire on eliminating threats. Now we're the threat. News vans line their street, camera lights cutting through closed blinds, turning their sanctuary into a fishbowl of speculation and accusation. For the first time, Blake understood what it meant to live without the protection of privilege. The case had exploded into national news overnight. Turner Tech airsides with plaintiffs against family company made headlines across business publications, while social media divided between those calling Blake a traitor and those hailing him as an ally. William Turner's public statement was carefully crafted. "My son's recent behavior stems from personal grievances rather than factual concerns. Turner Technologies has always maintained ethical business practices and will vigorously defend its reputation against these baseless accusations. Blake's mother remained publicly silent, but privately persistent, leaving voicemails begging him to come to his senses before irreparable damage is done to the family legacy. Only Blake's younger sister Emma reached out supportively, sending a text that simply read, "Are you okay? I believe you have reasons. Call me. You should talk to her," Zora suggested when he showed her the message. Not everyone in your family is your father. Involving Emma just puts her in the crossfire, or gives her a chance to choose her own path, like you did. Their apartment, once a private haven, now felt like a glass box under constant observation. Photographers documented their comings and goings. Anonymous accounts posted their address online. Death threats filtered through their lawyers, most directed at Zora. "I never wanted your money," Zora told him as reporters shouted questions outside. "I wanted the recognition that my father's mind built the foundation your family stands on." The pressure intensified when William Turner called a press conference announcing counter-litigation against Marcus Johnson for corporate espionage, claiming his former janitorial position had been used to steal proprietary information. The transparent attempt to reframe the narrative only strengthened public support for what was increasingly portrayed as a David versus Goliath battle. Marcus Johnson maintained his dignity throughout, continuing his janitorial shifts even as his name appeared in national headlines. "I've cleaned these offices for 20 years, he told reporters who tracked him down. "I'll keep cleaning until justice makes it clear whose ideas built these walls." 3 weeks into the media storm, Blake received a call from a former Turner Tech security executive he'd worked with before his disinheritance. "Your father has allocated $2 million for private investigation into your wife's background," the man warned. "They're digging all the way back to Detroit, interviewing everyone who knew her, looking for anything that could discredit her." "Why are you telling me this?" Blake asked. "Because what your father did to Marcus Johnson was wrong. Some of us always knew it, but kept quiet to protect our jobs. Now I'm watching him try to destroy another young black career, and I can't be silent again." That night, Blake and Zora moved temporarily into a hotel under false names, buying themselves space to strategize away from surveillance. "We need to go on offense," Blake decided, pacing the hotel room. "All this time, we've been reacting to my father's moves. We need to get ahead of him." "Ow!" He controls the narrative, the money, the connections. Not all of them. Blake pulled out his phone, scrolling to his sister's message. It's time to find out who else in the Turner orbit might know the truth about Marcus Johnson. The call with Emma lasted nearly 2 hours, his sister's initial shock giving way to resolute determination. "I've always known Dad could be cutthroat," she said finally. "But stealing someone's life work? That's beyond business tactics. Can you access Mom's old correspondence?" She was involved in early company decisions. "Already on it. There's a storage room at the summer house where she keeps everything. Dad never goes there." As Blake hung up, Zora watched him with new appreciation. "You're more strategic than I gave you credit for." "I grew up in the house of a chess master," he replied grimly. "I learned to think several moves ahead." The envelope arrived without return address, Blake's name typed on heavy cream paper. Inside, photographs of Zora meeting with a man Blake didn't recognize, time-stamped weeks before they'd met, with a handwritten note from his father. "Nothing about your marriage was accidental. Ask her about Operation Trojan." Blake stared at the photos. Zora in conversation with a middle-aged white man outside a coffee shop, dated 3 weeks before she began working at Turner Tech. "Who is he?" Blake asked, spreading the photos on the hotel bed. Zora's face fell as she recognized the images. "Jacob Levine, former HR director at Turner Technologies. He provided our initial documentation of discrimination patterns before being forced out. This was taken before we met, before you started the cleaning job." She nodded slowly. "Operation Trojan, my father's name for our plan. To infiltrate Turner Tech, to place me in position to gather evidence." She met his eyes directly. "Yes, Blake, I took the cleaning job specifically to gain access. And when I realized the CEO's son worked late regularly, I adjusted my schedule to accidentally encounter you." The confirmation of his father's accusation hit Blake like a physical blow, despite everything he already knew. Our entire relationship was engineered from the beginning. The plan was engineered. The feelings weren't. She reached for his hand, relieved when he didn't pull away. I was supposed to befriend you, gain your trust enough to access files. Marriage was never part of the strategy. That was unexpected. So you improvised. I took an opportunity, and then everything changed. He studied her face, searching for deception and finding only raw honesty. When did it change for you? The night you helped me study for finals instead of attending that industry gala. You chose me, an unknown janitor's daughter, over networking with tech elites. No one had ever prioritized me like that. Blake remembered the night clearly. Canceling his attendance at the last minute when Zora mentioned an important exam, ordering takeout, and quizzing her until 2 a.m. A simple choice that had apparently shifted something fundamental between them. I'm still processing all this, he admitted. But I need you to know, whatever happens with us, I'm still committed to justice for your father. What my family did was wrong, regardless of how you and I found each other. Her eyes filled with unexpected tears. That might be the most honest thing either of us has said since we met. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? What guided your decision? Share your experience below. The plan had a name, Operation Trojan, and a target, him. But what nobody calculated was how algorithms of revenge would mutate into equations of love. Blake stood at the window of their hotel room, watching rain streak the glass while security footage from Turner Technologies played on his laptop. The video showed Marcus Johnson moving methodically through executive offices after hours, dusting surfaces that didn't need dusting, emptying trash cans that weren't full, and occasionally, when certain the coast was clear, accessing computers left logged in by careless executives. Your father documented everything, Blake said, still watching the screen. 20 years of careful, patient evidence gathering. Zora sat cross-legged on the bed, surrounded by legal briefs. He had to. He knew it would come down to his word against your father's. A black janitor versus a white tech mogul. Who would courts believe without ironclad proof? The past week had brought a complete reset of their relationship. With Operation Trojan fully exposed, they'd abandoned pretense for brutal honesty, discussing every aspect of their initial connection and subsequent genuine bond. I need to see where it started, Blake said suddenly. Your home in Detroit, where you and your father planned all this. The Johnson family home in Detroit stood proud despite its modest appearance. Walls covered with Marcus's framed patents and Zora's academic achievements. A shrine to brilliance that refused to be diminished by injustice. Marcus welcomed them with quiet dignity, his apartment immaculately maintained despite its small size and aging infrastructure. The living room doubled as his office, with a computer station occupying one corner and bookshelves lining every wall. This is where we planned everything, Marcus confirmed, indicating a whiteboard partially hidden behind a curtain. Zora was 16 when we formalized the strategy. Before that, it was just a father's pipe dream of justice. The board contained a detailed timeline spanning 20 years. Evidence collection, legal consultation, strategic positioning. Blake's name appeared at the midpoint, marked with a question mark that had later been circled and highlighted. The unexpected variable, Blake murmured, recognizing the notation from their previous conversation. We considered several potential access points within Turner Tech. Marcus explained without apology. You emerged as the most promising when our sources indicated growing tension between you and your father over company direction. You studied me thoroughly, your philanthropic interests, your coding ethics publications, your dating patterns. Marcus met Blake's gaze directly. We needed to know if you were your father's son or your own man. And what did you conclude? That you had potential for independence, given the right catalyst. Blake absorbed this, oddly comforted by the clinical assessment. So Zora's accidental meetings with me were strategically timed based on your work patterns. The cleaning position gave her legitimate access to executive floors during your late hours. What wasn't in the plan was you proposing marriage, Zora added softly. That accelerated everything. Blake turned to her. But you accepted. Immediately. The opportunity was too valuable to pass up. Direct family access trumped months of careful information gathering. The brutal honesty stung, yet Blake appreciated its clarity. And now, where do we stand in the grand plan? Marcus and Zora exchanged glances before Marcus answered. The plan has served its purpose. The lawsuit proceeds with or without your continued involvement. What happens between you and my daughter is no longer about strategy. I chose you over the case weeks ago, she admitted, voice breaking. That's why the lawsuit moved forward without my direct involvement. I couldn't use you anymore, not when I started waking up each morning wondering if what we had could be real. The revelation hung between them as Marcus discreetly moved to the kitchen, giving them privacy. I need to know something, Blake said once they were alone. If we rewind to the beginning, knowing everything you know now about me, about us, would you still have gone through with Operation Trojan? Zora considered the question with the careful thought he'd come to expect from her. I would still fight for justice for my father, but I would have found a way to tell you the truth sooner. The deception has cost us both too much. Yet here we are, she agreed. The question is where we go next. As Blake processed her words, his phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Your wife has one more secret. Check her medical records from last year. She's not who either of you think she is. The sender, his father's most trusted attorney. Blake stared at the screen, then wordlessly passed the phone to Zora. Her face paled as she read the message. What is he talking about? Blake asked. For the first time since he'd known her, Zora looked genuinely frightened. I don't know. Zora, I genuinely don't know, Blake. She turned to call her father back into the room. Dad, they're saying something about medical record from last year. What are they talking about? Marcus took the phone, reading the message twice before his expression hardened. The accident. What accident? Blake and Zora asked simultaneously. You don't remember, Marcus said to his daughter, realization dawning. The doctor said there might be permanent gaps. Dad, what are you talking about? Marcus sat heavily on the worn couch. Last February, you were in a car accident after meeting with Jacob Levine. Severe concussion, temporary memory loss. You were disoriented for weeks, couldn't remember the 6 months surrounding the accident. But Operation Trojan was originally your idea years earlier. During your recovery, I adjusted certain details, refocused your attention on Blake specifically, rather than the general access strategy you'd initially developed. Blake watched understanding transform Zora's face. You used my memory loss to reshape the plan? To protect you, Marcus insisted. You were so disoriented, so desperate to continue our work. I gave you a clear target instead of the more complex approach you designed. So, I don't even remember my own plan correctly. Her voice rose with distress. The core mission remained intact, justice for our family. The methods were simplified during your recovery. Blake watched father and daughter grapple with this revelation, feeling strangely removed from their struggle. Your father manipulated your memory loss to sharpen your focus on me specifically. I gave her purpose during confusion. Marcus corrected. The goals remained true. As Blake processed this new layer of complexity, an unsettling realization formed. Both he and Zora had been pawns in larger games. He in his father's corporate machinations, she in her father's quest for justice. Both used by the very men they sought to please. We all have corrupted files, Blake told her, nodding toward the medical records Marcus now produced from folder. The difference is whether we try to repair them or hide them. Is it possible for a relationship built on deception to transform into something authentic? Have you experienced a connection that transcended difficult beginnings? Tell your story below. The truth about her past wasn't buried in legal documents, but medical records. Evidence of the accident that erased 6 months of her memory and rewrote her understanding of her own mission. The rehabilitation facility's records detailed cognitive therapy sessions, memory exercises, and the slow recovery of a brilliant mind trying to reassemble itself. Pages documenting the rebirth of the woman he'd fallen in love with. February 12th. Blake read from the medical file Marcus had reluctantly shared. Admitted with severe concussion, temporary retrograde amnesia following motor vehicle accident. Patient disoriented to time and recent events. Zora sat motionless beside him, staring at her own medical history as though it belonged to a stranger. I remember waking up in the hospital. I remember Dad being there. But the accident itself? Nothing. Common with traumatic brain injuries, Blake noted, turning a page. Your brain essentially protected itself by blocking the trauma. But 6 months of memories? That's not protection. That's theft. Marcus watched from across the hotel room, his expression pained. The doctors said some memories might return over time. Others might be permanently lost. So, when exactly did I create Operation Trojan? Zora demanded. 3 years ago. The original plan targeted multiple executives, with contingencies for various access scenarios. After your accident, you were frustrated by memory gaps in the strategy. I simplified things during your recovery, by making Blake the sole target, by focusing our limited resources on the most promising avenue. Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Zora, you were determined to continue despite your doctor's recommendations for rest. Giving you a clear objective was meant to reduce your stress while maintaining our momentum. Blake set aside the medical records, studying Zora's face. Despite everything, the lies, manipulations, and revelations, he found himself more drawn to her than ever. The woman he'd married had been fighting not just for justice, but against her own fractured memory. Your father adapted your mission during your recovery, Blake observed. Just like you adapted when I unexpectedly proposed. Both of you kept recalculating to reach the same destination, justice for what my family stole. Zora looked up sharply. Are you defending him? I'm understanding him. The goal never changed, only the methods. Methods matter, she insisted. Consent matters. I didn't consent to have my own plan modified while my brain was healing. Would you have done anything differently if you'd remembered the original strategy? Marcus asked. The question hung in the air as Zora considered its implications. I don't know, she finally admitted. And that's what bothers me most. I can't trust my own judgment because I don't know what knowledge I'm missing. Blake reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. None of us has complete information. We all operate with corrupted files, gaps in knowledge, blind spots in perspective. The question is what we do moving forward. The next morning, the three of them met with Aaron Cohen, lead attorney for the discrimination case. Cohen's downtown office offered the first privacy they'd had in weeks, away from media and surveillance. William Turner has proposed a private settlement conference, Cohen informed them, sliding a formal letter across his desk. His attorneys have indicated willingness to discuss substantial compensation for Mr. Johnson's contributions to early encryption technologies. He's trying to buy silence, Marcus observed. Undoubtedly. But the offer itself is significant. It's the first acknowledgement, however indirect, that there's merit to your claims. What's the catch? Blake asked, familiar with his father's negotiating tactics. Full confidentiality. No public admission of wrongdoing. No changes to patent registrations or company history. Money without recognition, Zora translated. Exactly what we don't want. Cohen nodded. I advised them our clients seek both financial compensation and historical correction. They've requested an in-person meeting to discuss creative solutions. It's a trap, Marcus said immediately. William Turner doesn't do creative unless it benefits him exclusively. Maybe, Blake acknowledged. Or maybe public pressure is working. The company's stock has dropped 17% since the lawsuit filing. Board members are getting nervous. Do we take the meeting? Zora asked. We counter-propose neutral ground with all parties present, Cohen suggested. Including Blake, if he's willing. All eyes turned to Blake, the unexpected bridge between opposing sides. I'll be there, he confirmed, but not as a Turner representative. I stand with the plaintiffs. As they left the attorney's office, Blake noticed Zora's unusual quietness. "What are you thinking?" he asked once they were alone in the car. "How much of who I am depends on memories I don't have," she answered, staring out the window. "I built my identity around seeking justice for my father. But what if that mission was shaped by someone else's interpretation of events? Does it matter? The core truth remains unchanged. Your father created something valuable that was stolen from him. But my methods, my choices..." She turned to face him. "My feelings for you, what if they're influenced by gaps I can't recognize?" Blake pulled the car into a quiet side street and turned off the engine. "Listen to me. Memory shapes us, but it doesn't define us. Your father might have redirected your strategy during recovery, but he didn't implant your values, your intelligence, or your capacity for connection. How can you be so certain? You've been lied to by everyone, not about everything." He took her hand, placing it over his heart. "This is real. Whatever path brought us here. Manipulation, coincidence, fate. What's between us now is authentic. I believe that. Why? Because neither of us is following anyone's script anymore. We're both off map, making choices our fathers never anticipated. That has to count for something." The courthouse steps teemed with reporters as the first hearing approached. At the center of the crowd, William Turner approached Marcus Johnson, cameras capturing their first face-to-face meeting in 2 decades. "I'll offer you $10 million to walk away," William said, not realizing his son and daughter-in-law stood close enough to hear. Marcus's response changed everything. "This was never about money, Bill. It's about the daughter you don't know you have. How much of who we are depends on our memories. If you lost parts of your past, would you still be the same person? Share your thoughts on identity below. DNA doesn't lie." The paternity test revealing that the man who stole Marcus Johnson's work had also fathered his daughter created corporate scandal and family chaos that no algorithm could solve. The laboratory results spread across their kitchen table. Scientific notation reducing life-altering revelations to percentages and probability factors. Cold data telling a story of betrayal that spanned generations. 99.4% probability of paternity, Blake read aloud, the clinical language failing to capture the human drama behind the numbers. "William Turner is your biological father." Zora stared at the document, her face unreadable. The courthouse revelation had shattered everything. Her identity, her mission, her understanding of her place in this legal battle. One sentence from Marcus had rewritten her entire history. "Did you know?" she asked her father, who sat across from them, shoulders bowed by the weight of decades of secrets. "I suspected," Marcus admitted. "Your mother and William had a brief relationship during our MIT days. When she discovered she was pregnant, she came to me first. But you never confirmed it? In 25 years, you never thought to check." "You were my daughter from the moment I held you," Marcus answered, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "DNA seemed irrelevant compared to love. Until it became a weapon in your lawsuit," Blake observed quietly. Marcus didn't deny it. "When William refused fair settlement, I decided it was time for complete truth." Zora stood abruptly, moving to the window. Outside, reporters maintained their vigil, unaware of the newest bombshell that would soon rock the business world. "So everything, our entire mission for justice, was actually about more than stolen technology," she said. "It was about him abandoning both of you." "The technology theft was real," Marcus insisted. "The discrimination was real. Your mother's choice to raise you with me instead of him was also real." Blake watched the interaction with strange detachment, his mind racing through implications. "If William is your biological father, I'm William's son. We're half-siblings," Zora finished, the horror of this possibility visible on her face. "Our marriage is..." "We need to confirm this independently," Blake interrupted, refusing to follow that thought to its conclusion. "This test was arranged through Turner Technologies' medical division. My father controls those labs. You think he'd falsify paternity results?" Marcus asked. "I think my father would do anything to destroy this lawsuit," Blake replied, "including manufacturing evidence to invalidate Zora's marriage to me. which would remove her spousal privilege in court testimony. Zora's eyes widened with understanding. A legal strategy. If we're siblings, our marriage is void, and I could be compelled to testify about everything you've shared with me about Turner Tech. Exactly. We need an independent test immediately. 3 days later, they sat in the office of a genetics specialist with no connection to Turner Technologies, waiting for results of blood tests drawn separately and under supervision. Biology doesn't define family, Marcus told Zora, hands steady despite the papers between them. 21 years of love does. He may have contributed DNA, but he never earned the right to call you daughter. The specialist entered with a folder, her expression professionally neutral. I have your comparison results, Ms. Johnson. Zora took a deep breath. And there is zero possibility that you and Mr. Turner share a biological parent. You're definitively not siblings or half-siblings. The relief that flooded the room was palpable. Blake reached for Zora's hand, finding it trembling slightly. In the previous test, claiming William Turner is my father? Zora asked. Based on the markers we analyzed, that result was either a testing error or deliberately falsified. Your DNA shows no familial connection to the Turner genetic profile we have on record. Blake's jaw tightened. My father fabricated the entire thing. We don't know that for certain, the specialist cautioned. But these results are definitive regarding your relationship to each other. You are not biologically related. As I left the office, Blake's phone rang. Emma, his sister. Blake, you need to see what I found in Mom's storage, she said without preamble. Letters between Dad and Marcus Johnson's wife from 1999. Dad threatened her when she wanted to report discrimination at the company. Threatened how? He said he'd make sure Marcus never worked in tech again if she went public. Blake, there's more. Financial records showing Dad paid off a college administrator to rescind Marcus's recommendation letters after he tried to claim credit for their joint work. Can you get copies to us? Already on it. And Blake? Mom knows I'm helping you. She hasn't said it directly, but she left the key where I'd find it. I think she wants the truth to come out too. The DNA test results appeared on national news before they'd fully processed them privately. William Turner's strategic leak attempting to invalidate both their marriage and the lawsuit in one calculated move. But the follow-up test results, still sealed in the envelope Blake now held, contained information that would change everything again. How do we respond? Zora asked as they watched William Turner on television, somberly discussing the family tragedy of discovering his biological daughter had unknowingly married his son. We counter with truth, Blake decided. Complete transparency. The independent test results, Emma's documents, everything. It's going to get uglier before it gets better, Marcus warned. Then let it get ugly, Zora replied, a new determination hardening her voice. I'm done being manipulated by William Turner or by half-truths about my own life. Blake studied his wife, the woman he'd married for convenience, grown to respect through conflict, and now loved despite every reason not to. Are we still in this together? Zora met his gaze steadily. More than ever. What makes someone family? Blood, choice, or shared history? Has her definition of family changed throughout your life? Share your perspective below. The second DNA test revealed a truth no one expected. William Turner had manipulated the results, but his deception exposed an even greater crime than anyone imagined. Court documents fluttered in the wind outside the federal building, journalists photographing evidence boxes being carried inside. Each containing fragments of truth finally assembled into a pattern of deliberate discrimination and calculated destruction. Your father didn't just falsify the DNA test, Aaron Cohen explained, spreading documents across the conference table. He created an elaborate fiction dating back to 1999, manufacturing evidence of a relationship with your mother that never existed. Marcus nodded grimly. When Diane threatened to report discrimination at Turner Tech, William didn't just threaten our careers. He began building a contingency plan to discredit her if she ever went public. The fake affair story, Zora said, understanding dawning. He created documentation of a relationship to suggest any complaints she made were motivated by personal rejection rather than legitimate discrimination. Exactly, Cohen confirmed. The fabricated paternity claim was merely the culmination of 20 years of groundwork. If Diane were alive today, she could sue for defamation. Blake stared at the evidence his sister had uncovered in their mother's private storage. Doctored photographs, manufactured correspondence, even receipts for hotel rooms never actually used. A comprehensive character assassination kit, assembled over decades but never deployed because Diane Johnson had died of cancer before she could tell her story. He was prepared to destroy your mother's reputation if necessary, Blake said to Zora, disgust evident in his voice. All to protect the company image. And when the lawsuit threatened that same image years later, he activated the contingency plan, claiming I was his daughter to create confusion and undermine the case. But he miscalculated, Cohen added, a rare smile crossing his face. By introducing false evidence in a federal case, he's opened himself to charges of perjury, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. The judge has ordered a complete forensic examination of all Turner Technologies' evidence submissions. Outside the law office, protesters had gathered with signs supporting Marcus Johnson. What had begun as a discrimination case had evolved into a symbol of corporate accountability, with Turner Technologies' stock dropping further with each new revelation. The pressure intensified when 3 former Turner Tech executives came forward with corroborating accounts of Williams' systematic efforts to exclude black employees from advancement opportunities. Their testimony, combined with Emma's document discovery, created a devastating picture of corporate malfeasance spanning decades. Marcus confronting William outside the courthouse became the defining image of the case. You took my work, my reputation, and tried to take my daughter's future. But you failed at the thing that mattered, erasing the truth. William's response, a dismissive wave as he entered his chauffeured car, appeared on every news channel, reinforcing the narrative of corporate arrogance versus human dignity. That evening, as Blake and Zora returned to their apartment for the first time in weeks, the weight of recent events hung between them. Do you regret any of it? Blake asked as they sorted through accumulated mail. If you could go back to before we met, would you choose a different path? Zora considered the question carefully. I regret the deception, but not the outcome. Not us. She looked up at him. What about you? Your family name is being dismantled in public. Your father may face criminal charges. I regret not asking more questions sooner, not seeing the patterns that were right in front of me. He moved closer, taking her hand. But like you said, I don't regret us. Their reunion was gentle at first, a reconnection after weeks of emotional turbulence. Then something shifted, urgency replacing caution as they reclaimed their connection in the most primal way. Bodies that had been kept apart by circumstance found their way back to familiar rhythms, each touch an affirmation that despite everything, this part of their story remained true. Afterward, lying in the quiet darkness, Blake's phone lit up with a call from his mother, silent partner in Turner Technologies and keeper of the company's most secure archives. Blake, Catherine Turner's voice was strained but determined. There's something you need to see before tomorrow's hearing. Something not even your father knows I kept. Mom, if this is another attempt to get me to drop support for the lawsuit, it's not. She interrupted. It's the original partnership agreement between your father and Marcus Johnson. The real one, not the version that was filed with the patent office. Blake sat up, fully alert. You have proof of their joint ownership. I have proof of everything. The original contracts, the formula for profit division, even the amended agreement your father created without Marcus's knowledge. She paused. I should have come forward years ago. I was afraid. Why now? Because what he did to Marcus was wrong. What he tried to do to you and Zora with that DNA manipulation was unforgivable. Some legacies aren't worth protecting, Blake. As they prepared for the decisive court hearing, Blake received a call from his mother, silent partner in Turner Technologies and keeper of the company's most secure archives. There's something you need to see before tomorrow, she said, voice unsteady. Something not even your father knows, I kept. Have you witnessed someone attempt to use manipulation to maintain power? How is truth eventually revealed? Share your experiences with justice delayed, but not denied. The final piece of evidence wasn't hidden in corporate servers, but in a mother's hope chest. Original contracts proving Marcus Johnson's ownership of code that built an empire. The original contracts, yellow with age, but legally binding, lay beside photographs of college-aged William and Marcus. Frozen moments of partnership before ambition corrupted friendship and transformed collaboration into theft. I kept everything, Catherine Turner explained, carefully removing document from an antique wooden chest in her private study. Whenever William updated company records, I preserved the originals. I told myself it was for historical accuracy, but I think part of me always knew someday the truth would need to come out. Blake examined the partnership agreement from 2002. Signatures of both men clear on the yellowing paper, terms explicitly granting equal ownership of all intellectual property developed during their collaboration. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Zora asked, the question lacking accusation, expressing only genuine curiosity. Catherine's elegance couldn't hide her shame. Fear at first, then comfort. The life William's success provided made it easy to look away. By the time I fully understood what he'd done to Marcus, we had children, a company employing thousands. The consequences seemed overwhelming. So what changed? Blake pressed. You did. His mother met his eyes directly. Watching you stand for principle despite personal cost showed me what courage looks like. Then when William manipulated DNA evidence to hurt you both, that was my breaking point. The documents Catherine provided became the centerpiece of Cohen's case. Irrefutable proof of both the original partnership and William's systematic erasure of Marcus from company history. Combined with the falsified DNA evidence, they created a narrative so compelling that Turner Technologies' board of directors began privately discussing settlement options. They want this to disappear before shareholder confidence completely collapses, Cohen explained during a strategy session. The board is pressuring William to resolve this without a full trial. What are they offering? Marcus asked. $20 million in direct compensation. Restoration of patent recognition. A public statement acknowledging your contributions to the founding technology. And the discrimination claims for other employees? A separate fund of $50 million for affected employees, with an independent review board determining distributions. Blake whistled softly. They're serious about settling. They're serious about survival, Cohen corrected. Turner Tech stock has dropped 38%. Major clients are threatening to pull contracts unless this resolves quickly. The board sees the writing on the wall. What's the catch? Zora asked, ever skeptical. William Turner wants a private meeting with all of you before signing anything. His attorneys were vague about his conditions, but this request comes directly from him, not the board. The meeting was arranged at Cohen's office, neutral ground where neither side held advantage. William Turner arrived alone, without his usual entourage of attorneys and assistants. The man who entered the conference room appeared diminished somehow, still impeccably dressed, still carrying himself with the confidence of wealth, but noticeably aged by recent events. Catherine, he acknowledged his wife first, surprise evident in his voice. I didn't expect to see you here. I'm exactly where I should be, she replied quietly, supporting the truth. William's gaze moved to Marcus, then Zora, finally settling on his son. You've been thorough, he said to Blake. More strategic than I gave you credit for. I learned from watching you, Blake replied, though I applied those lessons differently. Clearly, William set his briefcase on the table. The board has authorized me to settle this matter with generous terms. Before I do, I want to speak with you directly, without attorneys recording every word. Say what you came to say, Marcus prompted, his dignity undiminished by years of injustice. I want to tell my side of the story, William began. Not to excuse what happened, but to explain it. We know what happened, Zora interjected. You stole my father's work, erased his contributions, and built wealth by systematically excluding people who looked like him. Yes. William's simple acknowledgement stunned the room into silence. That's exactly what I did. The question is why. Does it matter? Blake asked. The outcome was the same regardless of motivation. It matters to me, William insisted. In 2002, securing venture capital for tech startups required certain appearances. Our initial meetings with investors made it clear they wouldn't fund a company with black leadership, regardless of technical brilliance. So you cut me out completely instead of fighting that bias, Marcus observed. I told myself it was temporary, just until we secured funding. Then the company took off, opportunities multiplied, and maintaining the fiction became easier than correcting it. William's gaze dropped to his hands. Each decision to continue the deception seemed small at the time. The aggregate effect over 20 years was monstrous. That's your explanation? Zora's voice trembled with controlled anger. Systemic racism made you do it? No, my own weakness did. William looked up, meeting her eyes directly. Ich chose Welt over principle. Expediency over friendship. I can't undo that choice, but I can acknowledge it was wrong. The settlement offer arrived with unprecedented terms. Full acknowledgement of Marcus Johnson's contributions, restoration of patent rights, financial compensation, and one unexpected condition from William Turner. I want to meet my daughter just once before I accept the consequences of what I've done. Catherine gasped softly. William, we established that Zora isn't. Not biologically, William clarified. I know that now, but in a very real sense, I've shaped her life as significantly as Marcus has, through my actions, my choices, the obstacles I created that formed her character. He turned to Zora directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness or relationship. I'm asking for one conversation, human to human, before this chapter closes. Zora studied the man who had been her enemy for so long. Why? Because I need to see clearly what my choices created. Both the harm and, unexpectedly, the strength. The request hung in the air, unexpected and unsettling. After a long moment, Zora nodded once. One conversation. After the settlement is signed. The papers were finalized the following day. Marcus Johnson officially recognized as co-creator of Turner Technologies' founding encryption algorithm. His name added to patents, his contribution acknowledged in company history. The discrimination settlement fund established for current and former employees. And most significantly, the announcement of the Turner Johnson Foundation for Ethical Innovation, funded with $100 million to support minority developers in technology. Is it ever too late to choose the right side of history? Have you witnessed someone find courage to stand for truth despite personal cost? Share stories of redemption below. 20 years of injustice couldn't be erased with a corporate settlement. But watching her father's name finally appear on the building that housed his innovations marked the beginning of a new code of ethics. The newly installed plaque gleamed in morning sunlight. Turner Johnson Technologies, founded on innovation, rebuilt on truth. Below it, Marcus Johnson stood tall, decades of custodial uniform replaced by executive suit that had always been rightfully his. How does it feel? Blake asked, watching his father-in-law trace the engraved letters of his name. Complicated, Marcus admitted. Pride mixed with the knowledge of how much was lost along the way. 20 years of my career, contributions I might have made. You made other contributions, Zora reminded him, linking her arm through his. You raised me with integrity. You documented injustice systematically. You created a blueprint for accountability that will help others. The ceremony to unveil the new company signage drew national media attention. Cameras capturing the moment when William Turner publicly shook Marcus Johnson's hand, acknowledging him as co-founder. The gesture, though symbolic, represented a seismic shift in how corporate America viewed responsibility for past discrimination. After the public event came the private meeting William had requested. Zora agreed to meet him alone in his office, the same executive suite her father had cleaned for years. Thank you for agreeing to this, William said, gesturing to a sitting area away from his desk. I'm curious what you think there is to say, Zora replied, taking a seat but maintaining her guard. William remained standing, seemingly unsure of himself, a state Zora had never witnessed in the confident businessman. I wanted to see you without attorneys or family present, to speak directly to the person most affected by my failures. I'm not sure that's me. My father lost 20 years of his career. True, but you grew up shaped by that loss. Your entire identity formed around fighting an injustice I created. Zora considered this perspective. You think you defined me? I think my actions created obstacles that formed you. Your determination, your strategic thinking, your commitment to justice. I'm not claiming credit for your strength, only acknowledging my role in making it necessary. What do you want from this conversation, Mr. Turner? Absolution? No. He finally sat, his movements betraying his age. I want to tell you that I see you. Not as Marcus's daughter or Blake's wife or my legal opponent. I see you, Zora Johnson, as the most remarkable outcome of this entire saga. I didn't come for explanations or relationship, she told him, unmoved by his attempt at connection. I came to show you that your greatest failure wasn't losing the lawsuit. It was never knowing the family you could have had if you'd chosen integrity over power. William nodded slowly, accepting the rebuke. Blake is lucky to have found you, even if the circumstances were unorthodox. Blake made his own choices, just as you made yours. The difference is, he chose principle when tested. He's a better man than I was at his age, William agreed. Perhaps a better man than I am now. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Not reconciliation, but a careful examination of consequences spanning decades. When it ended, Zora felt not closure, but clarity. The man before her was neither monster nor master strategist. Just human, capable of both extraordinary achievement and profound moral failure. Outside, Blake waited anxiously. How was it? Educational, she answered thoughtfully. He's not what I expected. In what way? He's more self-aware than I gave him credit for. Still justifying much of what he did, but at least acknowledging the choices were his. The following weeks brought rapid transformation to Turner Johnson Technologies. Marcus joined the board of directors, bringing decades of pent-up innovations to company planning. Blake established a new division focused on ethical application of encryption technology. The discrimination settlement process began identifying employees whose careers had been artificially limited by bias policies. Through it all, Blake and Zora navigated their own relationship, a marriage that had begun as strategy but evolved into something neither had anticipated. Do you think we'll ever have a normal relationship? Blake asked one evening as they prepared for the Foundation's opening gala. One not defined by family drama and corporate espionage. Zora laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months. Normal is overrated. Besides, would you really want boring after all this? Maybe a little boring might be nice. He adjusted his tie, watching her in the mirror. A chance to discover who we are together without crisis driving every moment. Is that your way of asking if I plan to stay married to you now that the lawsuit is settled? Maybe. He turned to face her directly. The question has crossed my mind. Zora moved closer, straightening his already perfect tie. I married you for all the wrong reasons, but I'd stay married to you for all the right ones. Which are, you chose truth over comfort, justice over family loyalty, partnership over dominance. Her hands rested on his chest. Those are good foundations for something real. Their private commitment ceremony took place that weekend. No lawyers, no strategies, no hidden agendas. Just two people choosing each other with clear eyes and honest hearts. The same judge who had hastily married them the first time performed the renewal, acknowledging the unusual journey that had brought them back to his chambers under vastly different circumstances. The law recognizes your original marriage as valid, the judge reminded them. This ceremony has no legal effect. It's not about legality, Blake explained. It's about intention. As they signed final documents establishing the Foundation's mission, Blake noticed Zora's hand trembling slightly. There's one more thing we need to talk about, she said, placing his palm against her abdomen. The future of Turner Johnson Innovation just got more complicated. What would justice look like in your life for wrongs you've experienced? Is restoration possible beyond compensation? Share your vision of true reconciliation. The child who would inherit both family legacies wasn't born from deception or revenge, but conscious choice, living proof that broken code could be rewritten into something beautiful. The nursery walls displayed framed code snippets, the original encryption algorithm that brought two brilliant minds together decades ago, now preserved as both historical document and family heirloom. This baby will inherit innovation without the burden of injustice. Marcus told them, hand resting on the crib they'd built together. You've broken the cycle that nearly destroyed us all. 6 months into her pregnancy, Zora balanced legal studies with her role developing ethics guidelines for the Turner Johnson Foundation. The organization had quickly become a powerful force in tech, providing grants to minority developers and establishing industry standards for inclusive innovation. Blake had stepped away from direct management at Turner Johnson Technologies, focusing instead on mentoring young engineers from underrepresented communities. His weekly coding workshops at community centers throughout Boston created pipelines for talent that might otherwise go undiscovered. The foundation received 500 applications for the first grant cycle, Zora announced, reviewing data on her tablet. 60% from women, 70% from people of color. Any standouts? Blake asked, bringing her tea as she worked from their home office. A team from Detroit developing encryption protocols for community health data. Their approach reminds me of my father's early work. Elegant solutions to complex problems. Their home, a renovated brownstone in a diverse neighborhood, had become both sanctuary and workplace. The upper floor housed their living quarters. The main level served as foundation offices, and the garden level provided community workspace for grant recipients. Your father called, Blake mentioned, sitting beside her on the couch. He's bringing dinner later. Something about celebrating the review board appointments. The Turner Johnson Foundation's review board had just been finalized, a diverse group of technologists, ethicists, and community advocates tasked with guiding grant decisions. Marcus had been named chairperson, recognition not just of his technical expertise, but his lived experience navigating systemic barriers. Did my father mention if your parents are joining? Zora asked carefully. The relationship between the Turners and Johnsons remained complex. Catherine had embraced her role as future grandmother wholeheartedly, while William maintained respectful distance, his quarterly foundation board meetings the only regular contact. Mom's coming. Dad sent his regrets. Tokyo business meetings. Zora nodded, having expected this response. William Turner's attempt at redemption had limits. He contributed financially to the foundation bearing his name, but avoided the personal interactions that might remind everyone of past transgressions. He sent this, though, Blake added, handing her a small package that had arrived by courier. For the baby, inside was a vintage MIT notebook, its pages filled with handwritten code and technical diagrams. A note explained, Marcus's original work from our first project together. You should have this back. Maybe someday your child will understand both what was lost and what was eventually found. W.T. Zora traced the faded pencil marks, her father's distinctive handwriting capturing moments of inspiration from decades past. He kept this all these years. Apparently, Mom says he preserved everything from their early work together, even while publicly denying your father's contributions. The gesture, returning physical evidence of Marcus's genius, spoke volumes about William's complicated journey toward accountability. Not forgiveness, not friendship restored, but acknowledgement of truth. That evening, as their unconventional family gathered around the dinner table, Zora observed the unlikely convergence of paths. Marcus and Catherine discussing foundation strategy. Blake debating encryption ethics with Zora's mentor from law school. Emma sharing marketing plans for promoting grant opportunities. I never imagined this, Marcus admitted quietly to Zora as the dinner wound down. When we started our mission for justice, I pictured courtrooms and compensation. Not family. Is that disappointment I hear? She teased. The opposite. He squeezed her hand. The money and recognition matter, but watching you and Blake build something new from the wreckage of old mistakes, that's the real victory. Later that night, as Blake prepared for bed, Zora stood by the nursery window, hands cradling her growing belly. The moonlight illuminated the room they'd prepared with such care. Books on both technology and justice filling small shelves, a mobile of interconnected code symbols hanging above the crib. Blake joined her, arms encircling her from behind, his hands covering hers protectively. What are you thinking about? How life writes more complex algorithms than we could ever design, she answered, leaning back against him. 20 years ago, our fathers were enemies created by betrayal. Now their grandchild will carry both their legacies. His hands traced the changing landscape of her body with reverence. Technology, mobile, humbled by the miracle their complicated path had created. Proof that the most complex problems sometimes find solutions in the simplest human connections. Do you ever regret how we started? He asked, the question he returned to occasionally, as if reassuring himself of their foundation. No, she answered without hesitation. Every line of code that brought us here was necessary, even the bugs and errors. I wouldn't change a single variable. He turned her gently to face him, his expression serious. I need you to know something. Whatever path led us here, deception, revelation, forgiveness, I choose you. Every day, I choose you. I know, she whispered, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. That's why it works. We're both here by choice now, not strategy or obligation or revenge. Their embrace deepened, passion tempered by tenderness for the life growing between them. What had begun as calculated manipulation had transformed into something neither could have predicted, partnership built on shared values rather than shared deception. This baby, Blake murmured against her hair, will never know a world where their grandfather mopped floors while his ideas made others rich. They'll never see their mother cleaning offices while studying law. They'll inherit a different story. A better one, Zora agreed. But they'll know the original code too, the struggle that made this possible. Some histories shouldn't be erased, just rewritten with better endings. So what would you do if someone saw your worth before you believed in it yourself? Would you run? Or would you build something that lasts? Comment below with what you would have done in her shoes. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little. Tell me in the comments what aspect of their journey resonated most with you. And remember, the most powerful code isn't written in algorithms, but in the choices we make when facing injustice.